Hello and welcome to today's episode 3 of TEFL Tips. And today we're going to be looking at 6 ways to teach vocabulary effectively. The teaching of vocabulary is a very, very important process for any teacher, and it's also an integral step for students to be introduced to new language and vocabulary which they understand, comprehend, and are able to use it effectively in communication in new situations. And so we're going to be looking at 6 tips, and these are things that I tend to do within the classroom, and I hope that you find these tips and these ideas useful for when you teach vocabulary in the classroom. So let's start. Tip number 1 is to show word stress. It's important that students are aware of how to pronounce a new word correctly. If they have difficulty of pronouncing a particular word, then this will inhibit their communication, it will inhibit the listener, and it will give the student a lack of confidence for when they speak English. So to introduce a particular way of pronouncing the word correctly is to show the word stress. And for me, what I tend to do is I tend to draw circles above each syllable of the word, and then a bigger circle for where the stress is. Students will then start to try and pronounce the word correctly if you show the word stress. This will give students confidence, and they will then be able to use the word effectively when they're communicating in English. And obviously, when you're teaching a particular word and you're showing the word stress, you can show how the word stress may change when the word changes from a verb to a noun. Tip number 2, try and show the word in context. It's invaluable that students know how vocabulary is used. You can demonstrate this by showing the words in a sentence, and it will give the students awareness of how they should use it. I also try and include the word within a particular grammar point that we've studied recently. So if we've just looked at the present perfect and the word is raw, then I would give them the sentence, I have never eaten raw seafood because I prefer my food to be cooked. Now, within this sentence, the students can guess what that meaning of the word raw, and from that context, they can see the word cooked or cooked food, and they go, well, it might mean food which is not cooked. And if you give them the context, they'll start to understand, and they don't need to do any sort of translation, or they don't need to check in a dictionary. They can guess from the meaning and in that context. Tip number 3 is to teach synonyms. Now, it's a simple technique, but it's not really exploited as much as you would expect. And it would really aid the students to better understand connected vocabulary. So if you're teaching the word hungry, you could teach connected words like starving or peckish or famished, and you can describe what these other words might mean. It will give a greater bank of vocabulary for the students to use in any situation. So rather than saying I'm very hungry, they could say I'm famished. Or rather than saying I'm a little hungry, they could say I'm a bit peckish. I find that students feel a lot more content when they're learning additional vocabulary rather than just the particular vocabulary for that lesson. Tip number 4, use pictures. Many students learn new vocabulary in a variety of ways. Some students might learn vocabulary by listening. Other students may learn that vocabulary by touching something, and some other students learn visually. So it's vital to support students with their learning style. If you can project the image on a whiteboard, that's great, but if you can make your own flashcards, that's even better, because with flashcards you can hand them out, the students can hold them, they can touch them, and you can play a variety of games to review the vocabulary as well. Now, tip number 5 is guess the translation. With our previous tips, I mentioned that, you could teach the vocabulary in context, or you can teach the vocabulary via synonyms. But I also mentioned that students should try and reduce the reliance on immediate translation. Rather than allowing students to immediately translate a new vocabulary item, I would let the students try and guess what the translation might mean. So it's a delayed translation process. You give them the context, you explain what the word is, and you try and get the students to translate after they've predicted what that translation might mean. What they find is once they've translated that particular item into their own language and they've had a thought about it, their idea, their thought is more often correct. It will give the students greater confidence that they don't have to rely upon automatic translation, and it will also reduce their reliability on translating something immediately. This will obviously help with other aspects of the students' skills, and it will give the students greater confidence for when they're reading, they can guess what the particular words are, and then once they're out of the classroom, then they can have a guess and translate and see how close they are with regards to translating new lexical items. Tip number 6 is to teach phrases and collocations. The final aspect that I focus on with regards to teaching is getting students to be aware of natural collocations with language and being able to use them effectively. If you're teaching words such as meeting, responsibility, or promise, then you can teach common phrases or verbs that go with these particular nouns. So for example, you could just teach the word meeting, you could describe what it means, but then the students will not know what sort of verb will go with this noun. So I like to say, well, we have the word meeting, and I like to write underneath to have a meeting. With responsibility, you could teach the verb take and to take responsibility. And with promise, you could teach the verb keep, to keep a promise or to break a promise. And all these words, all these phrases are natural collocations for English speakers, but the students will not be aware of what verb goes with what particular noun, and it's your responsibility as a teacher to teach these natural collocations. These phrases are more effective for learners to remember what verbs go with what nouns, and they'll sound a lot more appropriate when they're communicating in English using these verbs and nouns together. So those are my 6 tips with regards to teaching vocabulary effectively in the classroom. Which one do you think is the most important, and what do you think is the least important? Let me know in the comments below, and I love to read your comments. It's really enjoyable, and I really appreciate all your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You'll get a notification when I upload a new video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in a future episode. Happy teaching.